Ken. It's great to have you on again, and I'm so excited to hear about your trip down Route 66 and the Trans-Canada Highway. So let's start with a brief overview. Tell me about your trip.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's great talking to you again. And it was a good trip. It was exciting. It had its moments. It Some of them were being a lot of them were being out in the middle of nowhere and making sure that I was able to make it home safely. But it was a good trip. I basically wanted to ride Route 66 to see the backside of America, if you will, the parts that everybody rides by on the highways. I mean, if you really want to just buzz through it, you can do it in 30 hours by taking the major highways, but you're not going to see the real America, what it looks like now, what they may have seen when it's first started in 1926.
Hmm.
So you can read. I've always wanted. I've always heard the song Route 66, and I kind of wanted to, just do it. Just, I love jazz, but that's beside the point.
Not really.
But I wanted, the song Route 66 was, was a classic, and I started looking it up. And there's a lot of history to it. It started in 1926. That's the other reason why I wanted to do it this year. I'm glad I did it this year as opposed to next year. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of people on the road for the 100-year anniversary of it.
Good point. Yeah.
But I got an opportunity to do it this year. I retired and got a Triumph Tiger as a retirement present, and it's a great bike. It was a tank. I'd go through 105, 106-degree weather, and the coolant on it, the display was like, yeah, we're good, no problem. so, so it's a really good bike. I've had problems in the past with bikes overheating, so
Sure.
the
Sure.
Tiger was great. The other thing is the one I got has a almost 8-gallon tank, so
Well, that's
I could
nice.
long distance, which is important in the West. In the West, as you well know, there are sometimes 100 miles or more between gas stations. You got to, and coming back on the Trans-Canada Highway, I wasn't sure what I was going to run into. So it gave me some confidence that I would be able to make it.
Awesome. Awesome. So you're up in Seattle, and so
Right.
you kind of makes sense to break the trip into a couple of sections. I'm curious, your ride down from Seattle to you started in Santa Monica.
Right. I rode from the Seattle area through. So the first thing was timing,
Mm-hmm.
deciding when I was going to do it. I chose around the end of June because that's the longest days of the year. Give me the most time riding in the sunshine. So I chose then, but that's also in the middle of vacation season. So you got to keep that in the back of your head if you're going to choose that, because you need to make your reservations far enough ahead that they aren't all booked up. The other thing is choosing your weather. You're I would not suggest doing this at the end of fall and winter because, as we saw last year, the deep south, got their ice storms. So that doesn't matter whether you're on a car or a motorcycle. It's not going to work well with ice storms. The other thing is springtime, you have those straight line storms going
Mm-hmm.
through the Midwest. Have you
I've
probably
experienced
experienced some of those?
experienced a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, they're when you get one of those, I constantly was looking at the weather, obviously. When you get one of those straight line storms, you can either ride ahead of it and just keep ahead of it or just let it pass overhead, it, hopefully safely in a hotel. So, with all that in mind, I made my reservations. I did some tent camping, um, got my tent set up in Oregon, did that one. I wanted to do Highway 1. It was questionable as to whether or not Highway 1 was going to be open because they had a landslide that they were still working on. So, and I got a late start, so I just did quite a bit of highway riding to get down to
Sure.
Avila Beach. And I chose Avila Beach because it was just a couple hours away from Los Angeles. I could get up early, hopefully through Los Angeles traffic to the start of Route 66. And that took me 3 days.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, when I rode through, I came down off the San Bernardino Mountains and tried to ride through LA into Santa Monica Pier. And uh, so technically I've ridden through Los Angeles, but I didn't see anything, right? It's just the
Yeah.
traffic. The traffic is, I felt like it was in an episode of Saturday Night Live's The Californians.
Well, that's another good point. You're going to have to get over the pass in California. If you go too early in the year, you're either going to get rain, possibly ice or snow getting over Route 15. But yeah, from Santa Monica Pier um, to through Route 15,
Hmm.
that took me 2 hours plus extra just because of all the stoplights. It's
Sure.
just stoplight city.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an interesting part. But yeah, I started the Santa Monica Pier
Hmm.
as it shows on the route. I got my picture there. Of course, I pulled up on the walkway, but nobody wrote me a ticket, so I'm good.
Feel like they'd be a little forgiving when you have I'm sure that happens a lot when you have a bike loaded up
Yeah,
and and people taking their pictures. Um,
right.
so I think overall, I'm really curious. You had sort of planned out. Did you plan out sort of every day, or did you work in sort of blocks?
I I started the on my prep page. There's the GPS coordinates, and I did that from beginning to end every day.
Okay.
So it did change during the journey, of course. I brought my laptop so I could reroute myself through my GPX. I downloaded all the waypoints to the GPX and and basically did the setup. The book I really suggest getting is this Easy 66 guide.
Hmm.
So I do all these things on my own. I have no sponsors. It's my own. I don't have any advertising on my page. But and I also got the Butler maps, although I didn't find them very, very useful
Hmm.
for for Route 66. Um, I always get Butler maps because those are great for motorcycle riding.
Yeah.
But in this case, they weren't real useful. But Easy 66 has all the waypoints in there are from the Easy 66 guide. So, but it's really useful. It's got a lot of information in there. And if anybody's going to do this trip, I suggest that they use that as their prep. It's not that expensive. It's like, I think 30 or 40 bucks maybe, but it's well worth it considering how much you're going to pay for the ride.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Save you, I'm sure, lots of hours, and also will help you find some of the amazing and interesting towns, locations, and points along the way, which is
Right.
one of the things I'm really, really curious about is what stood out to you in terms of towns and locations and places to go. I think of the TP Hotel, Cadillac Ranch, and things like that.
Yeah. And you're right. There's lots of little things along the way that they mention in the book. Some of them, the Cadillac Ranch I did visit, I didn't stop at every little waypoint.
Hmm.
Probably could have done a little bit more than what I did of stopping at some of those more interesting places. And I would suggest that to everybody. So the one thing that I did find interesting that I didn't know before was Route 66 in 1926 was basically just piecemealed together out of roads that were already existing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, if you're going to ride it, you have lots of choices to make because there's the 1926 route, there's the 1935 route, the 45 route, the 50. There's probably half a dozen different routes you can take to quote unquote ride the road.
I did not know that. I guess I just assumed it was one route.
Yeah, no, it's got all kinds of choices, which again, the Easy 66 book talks about. The other thing is if you are a purist and you're like, oh, I'm going to ride the road 100%. No, you're not. There are places where the road does not exist, period. Or you're going to be trespassing on someone's private property and they probably won't appreciate that. If you decide to walk it or, okay, yeah, so I'll walk it instead of ride it. Well, okay, you might be ending up in the middle of a pasture with some large bull eyeing you. And there are places where you can see off to the side. They have the road marked as Route 66, but you can see off to your shoulder on the left or right. You can see that Route 66 road is actually there, but it's not you're not allowed to ride on it or drive on it. So it's interesting. Yeah, the big thing was again going through these areas and just seeing these towns. Probably the most interesting place was seeing these little cafeterias along the way. That I didn't know were there. I mentioned a few in the write up that I did, but they're just you ride in town and you just see a cafeteria there. Or the other thing I found interesting was I rode into one town and there was the 1/4 scale model of the Hubble Space Telescope. And
Yeah, I saw that. That seemed fascinating, especially for you.
yeah, yeah, I worked on the shuttle and helped launch that thing into orbit. So that was interesting to see that. And of course, I had to stop and take a picture. I had to be a tourist.
Of course. Of course. You didn't know that that was there ahead of time or?
No,
Oh, wow.
no, I didn't.
That must have been a real pleasant surprise.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't think I did. I may have noted it in my thing, but I think I just saw it. But anyway, it's yeah, it was interesting to see.
Yeah, and probably so many people would ride by it and think, "What is that?" But given your background, you ride by it and go, "Oh, that's the Hubble Space
Right.
Telescope."
Yeah. Yeah, I recognized it obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions I had was sort of as you rode this road, because it's got such a rich and varied history, did you feel like you were sort of riding through history, or did you feel that you were seeing sort of what's left?
That's a good question. It was a little bit of both. I was riding the same road as people rode in the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, and I was seeing the landscape as it changed. Sometimes for the better. I mean, you go through some cities like Albuquerque or any large city. Of course, they're prospering. But then you go through some towns like I mentioned in there. I think one town I went into, I needed gas, not especially badly, but I needed some gas, and I stopped in one town and a break too, and pulled up to the gas station. And I'm sitting there looking at the gas station. It is one of those old pull the handle off, turn the little dial, it clicks itself back to 0, and
Right.
I'm sitting there thinking, how many people actually know how to operate one of these things? And
Mm-hmm.
the guy that owned the station came out and said, yeah, we only have 87. Okay. So, the bike says 89, but it can exist on 87 for a while.
Sure.
And it was pretty much cash only business.
Yeah. I'd also wonder how many people there are that can repair those.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because that's an old ancient
Yeah.
technology. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me living in New York City, at Macy's, there are several of the old original wooden escalators. And apparently the escalator company maintains a small repair team just for Macy's because they're the only ones that still have some of these old wooden escalators.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see that. I mean, there's so many places where you see the old. signs
Mm-hmm.
that are, just slowly sitting there sinking into the dust. One of the cities I rode through, I was reading up on it because I was just going through my blog or my webpage, and it actually said that it was a ghost town. And I drilled into it from the maps and did the overhead view and saw indeed on the other side of the highway was probably a couple of dozen houses on dirt roads.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you see an awful lot of these towns that are just kind of slowly falling apart.
Yeah, I'll bet. One thing I noticed on my trip was sort of a resurgence of these retro motels. And there are some places that stood out to me, like in Bardstown, Kentucky, and in Bozeman, Montana, where I stayed at some of these really, that were sort of restored back to their 50s, 60s glory. Were there a lot of those, or were they mostly run down, or what did you see?
There were some there, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where some of the towns that actually started have figured out a way to thrive. Trying to remember which it was either a national park or a national forest area, one of the two, where a town actually um, revived itself by being a tourist place for that national forest area. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they had some of those motels that were being rebuilt and they were retro and they were, but I probably saw just as many where half the sign in front of it was, present and the other half wasn't. And maybe, maybe a few cars parked in front of a few of them. So that was an interesting mix.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be. It's fascinating, I think, to think about as as the new highway systems and the choices that they make for where to put the highways and just what kind of impact that has on the existing communities. A turn to avoid a town could have really spelt economic disaster for that town, and a lot of them, and it did for a lot of them, I think.
Right. It did. Yeah,
Yeah,
I went through Winslow, Arizona, and that was, of course, the song was running through my head at the time.
of course.
But yeah, it looks like that, you know, they probably need some economic development there in that
Yeah.
town. I didn't see a whole lot of thriving businesses.
Yeah, it's sad when that kind of change just gets thrust on a community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I also wanted to ask, when I was when I think about road trips on a motorcycle, there always seems to be another character in the story, and that's the weather. And so and so, what role did the weather play in your trip?
So, as we discussed, I was really, really focused on making sure that I chose the right time of year.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a little bit warmer. We happened to have a heat dome at the time. So I there were days where it was mid 40s in the morning when I started out, and by the end of the day it was above 100. So as always on a motorcycle, you're either one side or the other of comfortable. And but you got to plan for that. You got to bring along extra clothes to keep yourself warm and t-shirts to make sure that you're not, too hot. I also at one time I when I first got into motorcycling, of course I had to have all black gear because,
Mm-hmm.
you're always cool in black.
Right.
Um, but riding in Eastern Washington, I learned very quickly that black at 95 degrees outside doesn't work well.
Mm-hmm.
You get very hot, even though it was breathable, just the sun beats down on it. So my gear is now kind of a off green, and it was comfortable with t-shirt underneath. It was comfortable up to about 95, 90 degrees, maybe 95 depending on it. But yeah, above that it got really hot. I only had on the other side of uncomfortable, I only had one day of rain. So I was
Oh,
really,
wow.
really lucky. Yeah.
Wow. That is lucky.
And that was a cold day, of course, but the rest of the time it was tolerable or warm, one of the two.
Where were you when you got rain?
Going north out of Chicago
Oh, okay.
up to the Trans Canada Highway. I was in
That'll be cold.
was it Michigan or trying to remember what state that is. No, it's anyway. Yeah, I was it was a little bit cold there. I need to bring up a map to make sure that I know where I am.
That's it's Lake Michigan, Western Shore of Lake Michigan. So I think it's going to be Wisconsin and maybe a little bit of Minnesota,
Yep,
depending
you're
on how you
right.
went. Yep.
Yep. Minnesota and Wisconsin. I went directly out of Chicago to Wisconsin, then over to Minnesota. Yeah, that was a kind of a cold ride, but the rest of the time it was warm. I'd prefer warm over rain because warm sweat, dries off quicker than rain.
Yeah. So I noticed that as you as you as I read through your web pages, one of the moments that you chose to frame your trip was the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance quote by Pirsig about how being on a motorcycle removes the frame, and you're sort of right in there, and that's one of my favorite passages from the book as well. Um, so I was curious if there were any times that sort of stand out to you where that particularly where that sentiment felt particularly relevant.
Probably going through the desert. I love the semi-arid desert.
Mm-hmm.
And being out on the Mojave Desert and being out in going through Arizona and New Mexico is just absolutely beautiful. Yeah, you're hot, but yeah, you're just in this vast landscape.
Yeah, New Mexico is just stunning. The variation in the landscape, and then all these little green shrubbery on the buttes. It's just really it's a beautiful, beautiful landscape.
Yeah. And not very inhabited either. I mean,
Hmm.
as you go further east, it gets a little bit greener. Someone noticed that from my pictures. I was sending them pictures on the trip, and they're like, "Oh, it's gone from brown to green now."
Hmm.
And it's nice to be in greenery and the rolling hills, but then you start getting more and more people too, higher population.
Right.
So, more traffic, more cars, more things. So, yeah, I like the West. It has its things that you have to take care of, that you have to be aware of, like gas and the fact that you may be out in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone. But it's got its a real beauty to it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things I think we talked about the last time we talked was I think we were talking about Death Valley and just riding with the lack of cell service. And you said you had a GPS with you, so you could always at least know where you were. But we had talked about sort of what somehow how it's challenging that is sometimes to just we live where cell service is just sort of assumed all the time, but when it's not there, it's and you got to look something up.
Yeah. Or, you hopefully don't, but might have a issue on the road.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing I brought with me on this trip, and I always do on any long trip, is a tire repair kit,
Hmm.
because that's about the only thing I'm going to be able to fix, and oil, of course, and coolant. But yeah, mostly the tire repair kit.
Yes, I actually had my first flat tire while riding 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
or no, last week, and I was able to plug it and get to a dealer and get it replaced, and that would have you know I was only about 14 miles away from a dealer. This was not a crisis, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
but yeah. So when you think about your ride from the perspective of sort of not having a frame, like what surprised you about the trip? What surprised you about yourself as you were riding?
I was able to. I may have pushed it, but I was able to ride sometimes 2, 3 hours straight without
Hmm.
having to get off. and it was not uncomfortable.
Hmm.
So the distance, being able to just go the distance and just, like I said, pass through this landscape that for hours on end. Um, One of the other things about that I found interesting was there was a, speaking of small town surviving, there's this small town up in the hills. I want to say it was either Arizona or New Mexico. I think it's Arizona, that basically has turned into a tourist town.
Hmm.
And you driving up the road, and these are the surprises that you see. Driving up the road, I'm looking up ahead and I'm just like, there's something up there, and I see that it's donkeys. So these wild donkeys have started just reproducing, and people stop and they feed them. And the donkeys, of course, are people friendly because, but it's things like that that and you get into town and they're having a guy doing a shooting exposition.
Hmm.
But it's the different things that you follow. That's probably the biggest thing is different things that you find along the route that you didn't expect.
So I saw that clip. You were riding through town. There's tourists walking down the street. There's cars
Right,
on the
right.
side of the road, and then there's donkeys that you're having to, you know, not really avoid, but work around.
Workaround, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's that's just it. It's the I kind of going back to what you're alluding to. It's the things that I didn't plan for that, you can't plan for being out in the middle. Well, I know what it's like to be on a lonely road, but you can't plan for how it's going to be when you're actually in it. So yeah, it's I just enjoy that feeling of riding alone and just being out in the middle of nowhere. It's not a danger. It's I'm by myself and this is, nothing else to worry about. I'm just in the moment.
Yeah.
So that's probably the answer for your question is being in the moment, always being present and, monitoring, looking at your motorcycle, but also being able to look up and being able to see where you're going.
So you mentioned you mentioned a little while ago about some areas that you couldn't ride, and that aren't still accessible. I always love to hear what about the most sort of interesting or serendipitous route change you had to make, and how did it work out?
Um, well, one of them is I'm trying to remember. I remember the name of it. Aunt Annie Mae's Gravel Road, I think, is the one. Um, I got on that road and I thought, okay, it'll take me back to the highway. No, it directed me off in the middle of nowhere, and it was an interesting road to ride. Um, I managed to get back. Same thing with the gravel road that had the 3 or 4 inch deep gravel that gave me a little bit of interesting run.
Hmm.
But the one thing I was looking for that I looked for, planned for, but couldn't tell was the slug bug ranch.
Oh, okay.
I got conflicting information about if it still existed there or not. Ends up it
Hmm.
didn't. But the serendipitous part was I got this amazing view of a motel that was disintegrating, of a house that was disintegrating, of, spray painted cars and spray painted houses. Obviously, people had come by to visit before me. So that was something that I found interesting in and of itself. Another one was the St. Joseph, Missouri. I hadn't seen it. Is a Highway 66 neon park. They have
Hmm.
this park where they just put these neon signs up, and I'm going, okay, I didn't know about this. It was right across from the laundromat, which is why I saw it.
Yeah, that's yeah, for some reason it reminds me of the old neon sign junkyard graveyard out in Las Vegas.
Right, right. Yeah.
So
The other thing you're I keep on remembering other things.
yeah.
One of them was the salt flats in Canada. So I'm used to the West, the riding through parts of like Kansas. I keep on
Hmm.
going back to Kansas. Drove through Kansas once, and it was just flat,
Yep.
so flat. I was kind of concerned about that with Alberta and Saskatchewan
Hmm.
because it's just north of there, but it was amazing that it was rolling green hills. It was up and down. It was beautiful. I enjoyed it. And I was riding along, and all of a sudden I saw what looked like snow. Well, 90 degrees outside, probably not snow. Looked it up later. There are salt flats in, I think it was Saskatchewan, but it's in there. And it was just these huge piles of salt off the side of the road. And I did not expect that. Didn't know that that was, even there. So that was a serendipitous discovery.
Oh, so what made you decide to, when you look at the map, if you're in Chicago and you want to get back to Seattle, there is 90. There's nothing on it
Right.
other than Bald Drug, the Corn Palace, and of course Badlands and Custer and all that sort of stuff. But what made you decide to take the Trans Canada Highway back?
I love the Trans Canada Highway because of the views. I knew that in British Columbia it was going to be amazing, and it
Yeah,
was. The
yeah,
mountains, that's one place where it's dangerous to ride a motorcycle because you're sitting there looking at the views more than anything else. And I hadn't ridden Highway 1 all the way as far as it goes. So the Trans-Canada Highway is also an amalgam of highways. I started on Highway 17, which fairly quickly turned into Highway 1. But if you go east, which I'm not going to go, it goes all the way over into Nova Scotia, I think.
hmm
And that's another one where they say, oh, by the way, there's 200 miles of no gas stations. So be careful about it. I definitely wasn't going to ride east, but I wanted to ride west on that highway and see what it was like in the other provinces. And so I was like, well, I'll add another day or so to my ride by taking that.
hmm
So that's why I decided to do that.
Nice.
And so you also ask about serendipitous.
Yeah,
I changed my route to go into International Falls because every weatherman I know about talks about International Falls. And it's right at the border, and it's a nice. So crossing the border, I always look for places that are not huge highways going through because that always takes time.
right, right.
So I chose International Falls, changed my route to camp there, found an interesting campground. Um, that's another thing about camping that I found is that it's always roll the dice what you're going to find at a campsite.
Sure.
But I'm prepared for that. I bring water. That's one thing that you have to bring on this trip is water because you're going through areas of desert. And if you're camping, you might need water for something. But anyway, found an interesting campsite. Didn't have huge amount of resources, but it had a restroom, so it's really all I needed,
Hmm.
and some water. That is an interesting town, another little interesting town to go through that because it's discussed so much, I would have thought it would have a little bit more commerce, but it's an industrial town.
I kind of looked that up. Where I'm not sure where that is.
It's right there at the border of I think it's Minnesota.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's right at the border of Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And the other nice thing about International Falls is that if you go directly north, it takes you onto Highway 71. That was another serendipitous route to take. Highway 71 is absolutely gorgeous. It's another one of those lonely highways that takes you through the lakes, takes you through all kinds of different views. So yeah, I did have some serendipitous, as you say, routes that took me to places where I didn't expect to see scenery that was just amazing.
Nice. Yeah, I see International Falls. Trying to think where I crossed over. Oh, okay. I crossed over. just north of Duluth.
Okay.
So that's a little bit, yeah, that's a little bit away from where you were. That looks beautiful there.
Yeah, it's that is a another highway that I rode, and I was like, oh, this is amazing.
And so, what challenges did you face during your ride? Was wind or fatigue or camera trouble, or what happened other than gravel road and what ant something road,
Yeah, Aunt
ant
May's Road,
ant
I
maze
think.
road.
Yeah, something like that. You mentioned things that I are a problem in the West is the wind.
Hmm.
So you get on those flat prairies, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the flat prairies in the United States or in
Or in Canada,
Canada.
yeah.
You get these crosswinds or these headwinds that just so I have a problem. It's my problem. I forget to eat. You know,
Okay.
you ride along, you're doing whatever you're doing. You don't go through a town that seems to have a cafe that looks decent. Then you get to the campsite and you're like, put up your tent and you're going, I'm just not going to go out and get something to eat.
Right.
So I lost 10 to 15 pounds on this trip just because I failed to eat.
Okay.
Um,
So
so
we've got the Ken Hollis motorcycle diet plan.
right. But the other thing that I learned years ago was when you're on a bike, you use 150, 200 calories an hour
Sure.
just riding a bike. It's more than just sitting. And the crosswinds, of course, wear you out even more.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it was the crosswinds that helped me burn a few more calories, and the uh, the it also messed with my gas mileage. I lost probably 25% of my gas mileage when I was doing crosswinds. So you got to account for that too.
Right. Right.
I knew about the crosswinds. I didn't have previously. I was on my Harley, so it doesn't have a miles per gallon gauge like the Triumph did. I knew that gas mileage sucked, but I didn't know how much it sucked on the for that. But yeah, I
Right.
learned on the Triumph, headwinds cut your gas mileage by about 25%. So
Wow.
you
Yeah,
have
I
to
remember.
plan for that.
Yeah, I remember riding through Kansas on Route 50 going west, and it took me about 2 days. And the first day I had about 50-mile-an-hour winds coming from the south, and then the second day I had about 50-mile-an-hour winds coming from the north. And all I could think was, well, at least my tires are wearing evenly. So riding like on an angle for
Right.
all day, and just how exhausted I was at the end of the day. And it was a
Yeah.
straight road, but I was exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Because you're expending all those calories just keeping your bike up. And the other thing that I remember from a while back is when you're in that windy condition, when you have a lot of wind, if you go up through a canyon or in Canada, I went by some grain elevators, and all of a sudden my bike shifted over a couple of feet
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden the wind stops, and then when you exit the grain elevators, your bike is going to shift again. So you got to be ready for that shift so that you don't go flying off the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that when I was going west. So the trucks that were passing me were coming from the other direction. They were blocking the wind for just a second.
Right, right.
And I remember, feeling the bike just, kind of scoot over to the right or scoot over to the left. And then it just felt like someone just clocking you right in the chest, when the wind kicked back in after the truck passed. And
Right.
it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts. So let's talk a little bit about some of the practical sorts of things about your trip. You did a lot of planning. You got the Easy 66 book. You downloaded all of the GPS coordinates and had your computer with you so you could plan. Um, what did you discover about? I'm really curious because in your webpage you talked about camping and hoteling and sort of how you. Can I borrow one of those pictures from your
Yes.
website and
Yes. Please
of
do.
your bike completely loaded down? It's pretty impressive.
So the bike did the bike is a tank. I mean, it absolutely did everything I asked it and more. So and it's just an amazing bike. I love it. I did some research on the bike for this before getting it, just to make sure that I was going to have what I needed, and I did. I had everything and more. So love the bike. Um, the tires on it are 70/30. So
Mm-hmm.
70% on road, 30% off road. I was concerned about them losing their tread by the time I got home and talked with the dealership, and they was like, no, you should be okay. And indeed I was.
You had
So,
it was about 6,300 miles, I think
yeah,
your trip was.
right. And I put on 1,000 miles before, and I'm up to like, I think 8,300 miles now, and the tires are still good. So the tires were good. This bike is oil change every 10,000 miles as opposed to every 5,000. So I didn't have to plan that in the middle of my trip, an oil
Mm-hmm.
change. So I knew that. The I planned on camping every 2 or 3 days, and then I was reminded that my wife that I should probably do more like every 2 days camp and then a hotel. And it ended up by the end of the trip, it was probably 1 day camping, 1 day hotel, because offloading all that stuff off the bike and putting it back on every day is a royal pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, if I go on a trip this long too, I'm probably not going to take the tent, and I'll just do hotel,
Right.
because even if you don't camp, you still have to lug that tent in with you into the hotel and
Right.
carry it around. So yeah, that was the plan, but it's probably going to change next time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have the tire repair kit in my pannier, along with oil and coolant. And then I also have a bag of all kinds of things, like a little stove for making instant coffee in the morning. Um, I brought along my jar of honey and peanut butter, 50-50 mix for when I was hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Got all that put together. And I did planning for about the next 4 days, which is why going to a hotel is important. Then you can have time to sit down and make your reservations for the next 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure I had somewhere to stay, which,
Right. Reasonably fast internet. Maybe a
right,
washer. Maybe I'll do some laundry.
right, right. So yeah, the that was my planning for the most part. And yeah, the so I also have a page on there that talks about what I do for a trip, which I need to update. But the I have all the different things that I pack in my different panniers. So
I'll make sure to put a link to that.
let's see, prepare for a long trip. There it is, and let me paste that in here. I always I update that. That page is there not only for everybody to enjoy. Everything on my site is everybody can grab whatever they want. Feel free, but that page is there also for my reminder of what I need to do before I prep for a trip.
Right. Right. Yeah. I feel the pain about camping. I love camping. It adds an extra layer of gear, and but it also adds about an hour to 2 hours to every single day.
Right.
Right, between
Yep.
setting up and tearing down, and if it's rained, and now you're packing up a wet tent, and no one likes to do that. Um, and it's always something. So I have camped on the motorcycle, but now I throw I found a very, very small emergency tent that's about this big,
Right.
and I throw that in my pannier now just as okay, in case I can sleep somewhere. If something happens, I can sleep somewhere. But speaking of camping, I have to ask. Last time we mentioned this amazing Pendleton blanket that you have. That was only to be used for camping in John Day fossil beds. And did that make an appearance, or did that go with you on this trip?
No, no, I brought a down comforter along. It's just as good, and I don't have to take it down and wash it after the trip. So
So it stayed in its rightful place on the wall.
right, right, stayed on the wall.
So any other routines or habits that made the ride smoother for you? The honey and peanut butter is a really good idea. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that's because I mean it survived the 100-degree temperature. In fact,
Right.
mixed a little bit better, and it's as far as I can tell, it's doesn't require any refrigeration. I think it's pretty much impervious to just about everything. I don't know how we can eat it and it's good for us, but it is. um, the thing I found interesting about camping, I like your idea of carrying a little emergency tent. I might add that to my gear too. Um, the interesting thing for me was when camping, I would set it up, and by 8 o'clock or so at night, when the sun started making its way down, I was usually tired and I was able to sleep, which meant that I was able to get up earlier and
Mm-hmm.
start my routine team a little bit earlier. So yeah, I my clock kind of shifted to where I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning or something.
Right. Yeah, and that's some of the best riding times I found, and is you get up just as the sun's coming up, and no one else is out there on the roads, and I don't particularly like riding at night, um, so I'd rather ride in the early morning hours.
Yeah. And my days were planned for around 300-ish miles, 300 to
Hmm.
400. And I knew that I could make it in probably 6 to 8 hours. That's the
Right.
other thing for my planning is when you look at your writing time, they go, "Oh, it's going to take you 6 hours to get from here to there." Well, of course, you're going to have to plan a couple of extra hours for stops, you
Hmm.
know, gas, lunch, whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I try to plan. I think I've always tried to do between 5 to 8 hours of riding, which gives me 3 or 4 hours in the morning, a stop, 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, and then that's usually, and that could be several hundred miles, or that could be just tootling around one national park
Yeah, behind slow tourists.
behind some slow tourists, or even just gawking at every stop at Bryce Canyon or something along those lines, right? Just
Yeah,
you just don't make a whole lot of time on those roads.
right, right.
So can we recap as if for someone thinking about challenging or taking on Route 66, what are some of the resources that you would recommend? The Easy 66 book
Right.
is clearly something. Anything else? I was wondering if you use Roadside America, the website, at all, because
No, I didn't.
it usually has a lot of those interesting oddities and places to stop. I'm wondering if it's got a lot of things along the way there.
So even though I'm retired, I still had kind of a idea about how much time I wanted to take with this. And I probably should have taken more time to go by some of the roadsides oddities, as you say. But I should have probably shot for more like 250 to 300 miles a day as opposed to 300 plus miles a day. That was the only thing that I maybe should have made it run a little bit longer.
Hmm.
But
Well, to be fair to yourself, I don't think anyone has ever planned a trip like that and wished that they had done it for less time.
probably true. Um, but yeah, I looked at things that I thought might be interesting along the route, and stop there. Like, for example, the Royal Tyrrell um, Paleontology Museum. I did not realize that Alberta was such a treasure trove of fossils that nobody had ever seen before.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that either.
Yeah, it was well worth it. I went there on July 1st, which is Canada's Independence Day, and it was just chock-a-block with people. But I managed to get in and managed to go around, so that was interesting. Um, but but yeah, I there's all kinds of things that are on the route that probably, I would really suggest that's a good website you mentioned, and you might want to put it in the recording. The Easy 66 has a whole bunch of places that they
Hmm.
suggest, but yeah, that just before you go, just look through there and say, hey, I want to do these things. The other thing is it would have added a few more days to my route, but if you look in New Mexico, the old Route 66 goes up through Santa Fe.
Mm, Santa Fe is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Is you're up in the mountains, but Santa Fe is beautiful, and you might want to choose to go through, you know, Albuquerque up to Santa Fe and back down on
Hmm.
the old Route 66 that way.
Yeah, I
If I hadn't been there before, I would have gone.
yeah, I could see that being a detour that's well worth it.
Yeah. I mean, and Santa Fe is a little art hub. I think it's where they have a museum there for the artist. She was in the 1930s. I'm trying to think of her name now. But yeah, the Santa Fe is probably worth spending a day or two in itself as just a rest.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would suggest going through there and planning before you go, just to try and make sure that you hit all the interesting things. My personal interests are the national parks, and one of the places I hit was the Petrified Forest, which is
Mm.
right on the
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
I mean, it's right there. And another one of the surprises there was the Blue Mesa. So they
Hmm.
have painted hills and blue mesas, which are beautiful also.
And there's also a crater right there on the other side of 40. I think just around Winslow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The
Your
um
meteor crater.
meteor crater. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a meteor crater there somewhere. I saw that later. It's run by some family that has their own little museum there.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
So now that this bucket list trip is done and behind you, I'm really curious. If you had to pick a few adjectives to describe the trip, what would some of those be?
I got into my Zen. The
Nice.
big thing is getting in my Zen, kind of like just seeing the huge part of the United States that nobody's going to see unless they do something like this.
Right.
Those roads, you could pick any number of roads that take you along the interstates and see these kinds of things. But this was just one that was a classic road that I could take. Another one that I'm might take sometime when I go to the West Coast is Route 20, I think it is. It likewise goes through all the way from the West Coast over to Massachusetts, I believe.
20 or the wait, is it 20 or 50?
That's what I'm trying to see. 26, maybe?
Yeah, there's one that stops in I think it's Newport, Oregon, and then just goes
Yeah,
east all the way to Massachusetts. I forget the
there you go.
number. I forget
There
the
you go.
number, but that's the road you're thinking of, right?
Yeah,
Maybe it is 20. Yeah.
but there are nice road trips all across the U.S.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things that I wanted with this one was a nice long road trip just to get out and enjoy the United States. As
And Canada.
And Canada, Trans Canada Highway. If you believe in something in the afterlife, the only thing you'll take with you is experiences, and that's what I want in my life are experiences.
Amazing. One thing that really stuck out as I was reading through your web pages about the trip was just um, this amazing diversity of stuff that you were able to see. You know, trying to compare things like Santa Monica and the Bernardino Mountains and Cadillac Ranch and a paleontology. There's so much diversity, you know, going through places like St. Louis and Winslow, right?
Right,
And just
right.
seeing all of those different kinds of seeing all that different those different faces of the country is, I think, a fascinating part of that kind of trip for me.
And yeah, and happening upon places that have figured out how to enhance their economy through other means. You know, they've figured out, well, we don't have Route 66 coming through anymore. How else
How
are we going to create business?
right? Yeah, whether it's a neon park or a cafe or a retro motel
Right,
or, you know,
right,
some way of sort of staying relevant as the world is and the roads are changing around you.
right.
So you hinted at another cross country trip. Do you have any what are you planning? Do you have any specific plans, or are you gonna see how it goes and then plan?
I'm probably going to see how it goes and then plan. Right now, locally, I'm going to looking at a next trip across the passes here in Washington State. We have lots of passes, and this one is 410. It's trying to think of it. Yeah, it's Chinook Pass. Beautiful ride through the mountains. I've done it before. I'll probably do it again. And you have to do these passes in Washington State in a certain time frame because otherwise they get all filled up with snow and they're not
Right.
cleared. I just did a ride over to Coeur d'Alene, and I
Mm,
put that on the web page too. And that
yeah.
was through Route 20, which is north of us,
Hmm.
and it's the Loop Highway. I'm trying to think of the name, Cascade Loop
The
Highway.
Cascade Loop. Yep.
Yeah,
In fact, the
yeah.
video I'm working on today is my trip from Anacortes to Osoyoos, and
Ah,
I took Route 20 through the North Cascade National Park, and
okay.
that section of road between Diablo and Ruby Pass, I think it is.
Yep,
Oh, it's just stunning, stunning.
exactly. And yeah, did that recently. Rode around Coeur d'Alene for a couple of days on the lakes, and just I'm going to do another pass. But that Highway 20 is not open typically until June, and then shuts down in like November. So I'm probably going to do a couple more passes on here. I've done a few and documented them on my page, but I'm probably going to do a couple of passes this summer. But for now, it's local stuff. But I'm going to see what might be next. I have
Hmm.
relatives over on the East Coast, so I might actually go, take a long trip just to go see them.
Nice. One of the areas out by you that I've really been fascinated by wanting to go ride. I got as far as from Interstate 5, I think it's Interstate 5 over to Mount St. Helens. But then
Ah,
just east of Mount St. Helens, it looks like there's some absolutely beautiful areas that I just didn't get a chance to go through.
Mount St. Helens is one of them that I haven't gone. We haven't visited yet, so that's probably one area that's on the bucket list too.
Well, check out your Butler maps. There's some really good just east of. There's a couple of forests east of Mount St. Helens, and they look beautiful.
I'll have to do that. Yeah. Everything, like I said, I mentioned on my site are things that I use and buy. I don't ask for any sponsorship. And Butler Maps is one of those things that I really suggest for anybody riding a motorcycle.
Yeah,
Just shows you all kinds of roads you'd never know.
they're incredibly helpful. I use Rever for a lot of my planning, and Rever has the Butler maps built in, and so you can see where you're going and which route it is, and it's really helpful. Well, again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on Miles Shared. Uh,
Great,
I,
been great talking to you. Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, I loved following your trip, and getting to hear the stories and the moments in person has really been great. I really appreciate it, and I want to just thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And I look forward to hearing about your future travels.